Thank you for your patience. Great. So we are now live both on Zoom and webinar and on YouTube live on the Air District's channel. So once again, welcome to the May 2021 meeting of the AB 617 Portside Steering Committee. And with that, I'm Daniela Simunovic, one of your co-hosts. And with that, I'll hand it over to my co-facilitator, Chuy Flores, to lead us through the welcome.
Good evening, everyone. So for tonight's meeting, the objectives include discussing metrics for the Community Emissions Reduction Plan, discussing priorities for community identified AB 617 incentive projects, as well as providing the California Air Resources Board staff feedback on the toxic risk modeling for the Community Emission Reduction Plan. Today's agenda, we'll be doing a roll call and a couple of updates. Afterwards, we'll be voting on last month's meeting notes and tonight's agenda. And following that, Domingo will be leading a discussion around SERP metrics to measure progress. Following that, Kathy Keehan will be leading us through an exercise around community identified projects for priorities. And then following that, the San Diego APCD and CARB will be leading a discussion on the air toxic risk modeling. Following that, we'll be opening up for general public comment and closing the meeting out. Just doing a quick review of the meeting agreements. We remind folks to help create a space for everyone to contribute, step up and step back, have only one person speak at a time, listen to each other and respect each other's opinions, knowledge, and perspective. We'll do our best to be conscious of time and have everyone out by 8. And again, please speak slowly for our interpreter. At this stage, we're going to start a roll call. Daniela, do you want to lead this?
Sure. So you want to go to the next one? Wonderful. So I'm just going to call your name, and if you can unmute and be ready to tell me if you're here or not. Ashley Rocia Tremonti. I don't see her. Is Christy Darachani here from the city of San Diego? Okay, so no representation tonight from San Diego. Jack Munger.
Good evening, I'm here.
Great. Massey Hatch.
Yes, I'm here. Hi.
Hi, Massey. Sarah Giobi.
I'm here, thank you.
Great. Sandy Naranjo.
Here.
Great. Larry Hofreiter.
I'm here.
Great. Elisa Arias. No Elisa tonight. Is Carrie Robinson here?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, hi, Carrie. Thanks for joining us. Joy Williams.
I'm here.
Hi, Joy. Jorge Gonzalez.
Here.
Hi, Jorge. Martin Reeder from National City emailed me to let me know he wasn't going to be here, but that David Welch was going to be in his place. Is there a David Welch here today with us?
I'm here.
Great. Hey, David. Thanks for joining us. Roman Partido Lopez? No Roman yet? Okay, no Roman. Stephanie Yoon also emailed to let us know she won't be here tonight, but Sabrina Perino, Dr. Perino, are you with us tonight? She said she would join, so I will keep an eye out for her when she does. Jose Marquez Chavez?
Here.
Great. Diane Vermeulen, are you also here? Great, she's not here tonight. AC Dumal?
Good evening. Good evening. I'm here.
Hi, AC. Helen Haas?
I'm here.
Great. Dinah Willier?
Oh, I'm here.
Hi, Dinah. Did I say your last name right?
Willier, yes, thank you.
Willier, perfect, okay. Filomena Marino? No Filomena tonight. Janice Reynoso. I'm sorry, Janice Luna Reynoso, I believe. Sorry for that typo in my notes. Are you here, Janice? You are there. Okay. Are you, for some reason, trapped? Okay. Sorry. Promoting you to panelist now. Okay, great. Ted Gottschalk. Great. Hillary Medina. No Hillary. Okay, no Hillary. Alicia Sanchez.
Presente.
Margarita Moreno.
Aquí.
Muy bien. Presente. Irma Ortiz. No Irma tonight. Vanessa Contreras.
I'm here.
Hi, Vanessa.
Hi.
Salvador Razabrica.
I'm here.
Está. Montserrat Hernández.
Here.
Perfecto. Silvia Calzada.
Present.
Perfect. Ashley Valentín González.
Here.
Perfect. Josephine Talamantes.
I'm here.
Perfect. And Maritza Garcia.
Here.
Yay, wonderful. Okay, well, we definitely have a quorum tonight. Thank you all for being here with us. And with that, we can go on to the next item, which is approving the meeting minutes from last month's meeting. So Chewy? Oh, you have updates first. Sorry, go ahead.
No, no problem. We have a couple of SERP related updates. So if you recall last month, the week of April 27th, the APCD had 2 SERP workshops that are available on YouTube for folks to watch if you're interested. Also, there is not a SERP implementation update this week just because the agenda got a little full. So Domingo will be sending an email update to everybody on where implementation for phase 1 SERP is. Additionally, this Friday, the APCD staff will be giving the board an update on the SERP at 1:30 for folks that are interested in listening. And lastly, this upcoming meeting in June, steering committee meeting, the APCD board will be asking the steering committee for a formal vote on the final community emissions reduction plan. So lots of things coming. Domingo, is there anything else or any questions?
No, I just wanted to clarify, district staff we will be presenting the final SERP next month to the steering committee so that the steering committee can approve the final document before we present it in July to our board.
Thank you. And at this time, we're going to ask the steering committee to vote on last month's meeting notes and today's agenda. If we can get a motion.
I move to approve. Ted?
I'll second. Sandy.
Anybody opposed? Hearing none. So the meeting notes and the agenda is approved. I did want to note that there is a hand raised, Daniela.
Yeah, great. So I see Olivia. So let me, maybe we could take a pause just to, oops. Oh, Olivia, did you accidentally have your hand up, or did you want to make a comment or a question? If you would like to make a comment or a question, you can do so. You can unmute yourself.
I'm sorry, like I just had to dial back in. I must have hit that by accident. My bad.
Oh, okay, no worries. Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay. All right. Great. So with that, we can go on to the presentation on the SERP metrics. So with that, we'll hand it over to Domingo.
Thank you, Daniela. So I want to just quickly say thank you for all the SERP subcommittee members for their feedback. We discussed this item with the SERP subcommittee. We exchanged a number of emails on this, and we solicited initial feedback just to present some initial ideas to this larger committee on what some metrics could be to help us track progress on the different actions in the SERP. So with that, I'll be speaking today, just walking us through the different actions and some of the proposed metrics. If anybody has any questions or any specific ideas, anything that you think we might be missing, we certainly welcome your input. With that, I'll just go ahead and get started. Can we go to the next slide, please? So before we go to the metrics, I just wanted to share some key definitions. So when we talk about a strategy, we're talking about a careful plan or method, right? So this is basically how we are going to accomplish something. So an example in the SERP is our outreach and community engagement strategies, right? So those strategies are telling us how we're going to implement our outreach and how we are going to engage the community. A more specific action is a step to achieve an objective or a strategy. In this case, an action, for example, in the SERP, under the outreach and community engagement strategy is to develop and implement a public participation plan. And then going further down, what a metric is a standard that will help us measure if we are, how close we are to implementing an action or if an action has been implemented. So for example, how do we know if we are being successful with our public participation plan? Well, our metric will be, or could be, tracking the number of individuals reached by any of our given activities, whether it's a public workshop or receiving comments through an open comment period in any of our documents, or participation in our board hearings, etc. So just wanted to share that so that we're all on the same page as to what we're talking about here. Next slide, please. So first, let's talk about the outreach and community engagement strategy. Our actions there for action A1, developing and implementing an incident response plan. So how can we know that this metric is being successful? One of the metrics that we're proposing here is, well, one, if the plan has been developed, right? So if the incident response plan was developed. Also adding metrics in relation to the response time, how long would it take us to respond to a particular incident, whatever that response may be, and that will be further defined in our response plan. Also, what outreach was done to stakeholder agencies and organizations, and also adding language in demographics or disability needs to report. And actually, I believe this was actually for a different action. This is for the public participation plan, that last piece right there. So as I move forward, please just, if there's anything that jumps out to you, please take note so that we can discuss at the end and we can go back to the different slides. But I think that for purposes of being able to cover all the information, because it's a lot of information, we'll just go through all of the different actions and then we can come back and discuss. Next slide, please. For action 2, developing and implementing a public participation plan. Number 1 is the plan developed. Another metric that we could use is the number of individuals reached by APCD's activities, and also the participation by residents of environmental justice communities in our different activities. Next slide, please. For action 3, developing the plan to quantify and prioritize the community health risks from air pollutants. We want to look at what were the health risks that were identified and if they were communicated to the public. What's the prioritization of those health risks, and also involvement of Brady's Asthma Center to identify causes of asthma and outreach to the community. And a lot of these different pieces can help us not just know if the action is being implemented or not, but also how successful we are being in implementing that particular action. So as you can see in these different metrics, we're not just focusing on whether an output has been produced or not. It's also looking beyond producing the output. Is that output successful? Is that action successful in doing what we're trying to do? Next slide, please. Establishing an Office of Environmental Justice within APCD. One of the metrics is, do we have staffing for the Office of Environmental Justice? And also, is staff available with ASL or other language experience? Next slide, please. Implementation of additional flexibilities for mobile source incentives. Now we're on our incentive strategies. In general, the number of additional programs that are affected that affected communities have available through AB 617. Also, emission reductions from the different projects and emission reductions at particular sensitivity sites like schools. Then another one is adding number by small businesses or large businesses or business to business, etc. Reducing emissions from passenger vehicles. This is very straightforward, and we can talk about the number of tons of emissions reduced through AB 617 incentive programs. So that's ultimately the goal for this action. Next slide. Developing and implementing a residential air filtration and air monitoring program. So how many filters have we deployed through that program, or how many monitors? Also, what's the reduction of indoor air pollutants at homes with installed monitors and filters? And we can measure that at a particular, every 6 months, for example, based on the monitors that are deployed. I'm sorry. Next one is incentives and outreach for incentive programs. And we were looking at the number of individuals and organizations reached through the program, also the number of applications we received, and if the criteria was fair for drivers, and identifying different types of businesses, nonprofits, public and private entities that can benefit from these programs. Next slide, please. So for rule development, looking at all the different rules and targets that we have for emission reductions there, we can look at, as we look to evaluate Rule 1206, which is our asbestos removal and renovation and demolition to regulate residential structures, number of estimated residential structures that may undergo renovation each year, estimated cost for notified projects, completion of evaluation, and then finally the adoption of the rule. Another action here is evaluation of a Rule 1210 of our toxics program. And on this one, we can take a look at what the health risk reduction is in the rule, completion of the evaluation of the rule, and also ultimately the reduction of cancer risk threshold for mandated risk reductions. What does that look like? Evaluating existing rules and considering new rules. For this one, there's a number of rules that were proposed under the SERP, and for all of those, we can look very specifically at emissions reductions achieved through the revision of the rules. And same thing for amending District Rule 1401, which is part of the group of rules that were proposed to be amended. Next slide, please. For our enforcement actions, the first action there is proposed the development of a supplemental environmental project program within the violation settlement program. So in this case, we would look at the number of available or applicable environmental community projects, number of facilities interested in participating in a SEP, adoption of the SEP program with a violation settlement program, and number of projects in Portside or other disadvantaged communities. Next action would be to evaluate the feasibility of expanding mobile source enforcement program. So for this one, we can track the number of vessels subject to the commercial hovercraft regulation. And if the MOU is expanded, we can look at the number of violations issued and compliance rates. For evaluating the current air quality complaint process, we can look at our complaint response time, how long it takes us to address those complaints, and also ensuring consistency with criteria included in AB 423 regarding intersections and public notification. Next slide, please. Continuing our enforcement actions, increasing APCD's presence in the Portside community. We can track how many inspections are conducted annually, also the number of violations issued or citations issued. Next action would be evaluate the feasibility of utilizing portable emission analyzers to verify compliance. So if these were feasible to use, we can take a look at the number of inspections conducting this technology and also the number of compliance determinations made. The next one will be evaluating the feasibility of expanding enforcement of truck idling regulations within the Portside community. So for this, we can track the number of inspections conducted annually and the number of violations and citations issued. Next slide, please. So for heavy duty truck strategies, action E1, advancing the deployment of heavy duty on-road electric trucks. We would track the progress of the completion of port truck actions, development EV strategy for the region, development of an EV infrastructure plan for the region. Also progress on the use of zero emission vehicles by businesses within Portside. We can look at grant funding for zero emission vehicles and infrastructure, and also do periodic reports from experts from the National Center for Sustainable Transportation regarding feasibility and availability of electric heavy duty trucks. For action E2, fair outcome for small fleet owners, evaluating the costs and benefits of zero emission vehicle requirements and grant funding for small fleets. We can track the participation and concurrence of trucker representatives that fairness goals are being met. Next slide, please. Supporting a dedicated truck route and avoiding truck impacts to local community. We can look at the San Diego Police Department statistics on compliance. Also an informal assessment of truck route compliance from community residents, perhaps doing a survey, working with the city of San Diego to publicize dedicated truck routes among truck companies, drivers, and Portside businesses. Our next action, increasing the number of truck parking and staging facilities with electric charging capabilities. We can look at the completion of a feasibility study and identifying of potential parking and charging facilities. Then ensuring fair outcomes for truck drivers. We can look at grant funding for zero emission vehicles and infrastructure and see how that benefits the truck drivers. Next slide, please. For our land use strategies, supporting land uses that serve as a buffer between industrial and residential uses in the Portside community, we can look at the actual adoption of land use plans with buffer provisions. Also reducing exposure for sensitive receptors within 500 feet of port freeways and industries. We can work with the city of San Diego to restrict residential construction within 500 feet of freeways and industries and see if this is something that can be accomplished. So that's something that we can take a look at. For urban greening, I believe there's an error on this one because it's not a program, but we can take a look at the change in tree canopy in the community. For public school exposure reduction, we could look at installing sampling equipment at public school sites, or the participation of school sites in our incentives to get air filtration in the schools. Next slide, please. Supporting Harbor Drive multimodal corridor study land use proposals. For this one, we don't have a specific metric because this particular project, the Harbor Drive multimodal corridor study is basically a collection of a large number of projects. So each project that the document is supporting, we would have to track individually. The neighborhood resiliency and housing stability. One metric that we could use is assessing the health impacts such as built environment and environmental prevention. And part of this is included on what's proposed in the action is conducting a health equity assessment as part of this. Improving transportation efficiencies, looking at income or lack of income, looking at the number of rate emissions reduction by type of transportation, and also safety measures for transportation. For truck diversion, we can work with the city of San Diego to publicize dedicated truck routes among trucking companies and drivers and Portside businesses. Next slide, please. For our waterfront activities, first action, they're reducing diesel emissions from cargo handling equipment. We can look at the number of replacement of cargo handling equipment and the resulting emission reductions. For reducing emissions from ships at berth, we can take a look at the cruise ship terminal, an additional plug to existing shore-powered systems. We can look at the National City Marine Terminal and see if there are any additional shore power systems. Same with the 10th Avenue Marine Terminal, and see what progress is made in those at those sites. Reducing emissions from harbor craft. We don't have a specific metric identified, but we can take a look and work directly with industry to see what that looks like as a result of the regulations that are coming from the state. Reducing diesel PM and NOx emissions from portable air compressors and other diesel sources at shipyards. We can do the same thing and look at what new equipment or what emissions reductions are being achieved from updates in the equipment. Next slide. Next slide, please. Promoting best practices for reducing diesel, VOCs, and other emissions from ship repair activities. We can check in annually with the steering committee regarding the number of participants and who they are, promoting these best practices. Reducing emissions from shipyards from employee transportation. We can have a report annually on the employees participating in this program. And also promoting adoption of zero emission technologies by port tenants, truckers, and other users of equipment. It would be the same approach. We can, for example, track the number of tenants that are using zero emission technologies. Reducing emissions associated with traffic at Naval Base San Diego. We don't have a specific metric identified for this one yet, so your input is certainly welcomed here. Next slide, please. Finally, our advocacy metrics. This one will be very specific depending on the type of advocacy or the project that we're advocating for, but we can take a look at how many projects is the steering committee supporting, what type of actions are taken, whether it's submitting a comment letter or participating in a public meeting to voice support for the particular project. So this one will be very project specific. But as you can see, there's a large number of actions and also a lot of different things that we can track. These are just some ideas. It doesn't necessarily mean that all of these will be implemented, but we need to, we're open to the discussion and to your input today. And we also will continue to refine our metrics so that, number one, we can have metrics that are clearly linked to the action identified, so that we can very easily track whether the action is being implemented, and also if the implementation of the action is giving us the results that we want. That's the main focus for the metrics. And two, we don't want to overwhelm you with all these different metrics, right? We want to select the ones that make more sense and that would be also easy to collect, because there's also a lot of resources involved in collecting a lot of this information. So it's a combination of what's practical, but also what's useful to inform the community. So with that, I'll open it up to questions. If anybody has any questions or suggestions, something that you liked, that you didn't like, this is just, again, a proposal to get your thoughts.
Greetings. Hello, everybody. My name is Janice Luna Reynoso from Mothers Out Front and Mundo Gardens here in National City. I do want to recognize that we are on Kumeyaay land regarding any social justice or land use water issue. It's good to mention. I do want to go back to the land use clarification. There was like you mentioned, like a typo. In the beginning stages, we did even talk about green spaces, possible gardens, correct? Did that kind of get fleshed out through the last SERP meetings with the community, the stakeholder input?
Could you repeat that, Janice, again? Which measure?
When we're urban greening, so any specifics, I remember, gardens being mentioned, green spaces. It wasn't on this specific thing. I don't know if it's a typo or if it was just kind of filtered out through the last couple community stakeholder meetings, like kind of pushed out of the way.
Right. No, it's still part of the plan. These actions that you see listed here are basically the title of the action. It doesn't include it doesn't include a description of what the action is. This is just for us to help us identify metrics for each of the different actions. But we did include that as part of the SERP, and it's part of the description for the urban greening action.
Thank you. And then another related question is, with the advocacy, with the H portion of it, H1, supporting emission reduction opportunities, for example, any effort to create those green space or any programming or grants that are coming up within the community, we can reach out to this committee for a support letter. Is that part of the H portion, the advocacy?
Yes. So a lot of the actions in the SERP will require a lot of advocacy, because a lot of these actions are already being planned as part of a separate project or a separate planning effort. So in those instances, agencies that are responsible for those programs or projects have their own processes, and that's where the steering committee will need to get engaged and support those types of projects by, again, support letters or attending the public meetings and voicing their support for the different projects, etc.
Thank you.
So this is Daniela. I'm going to jump in. So the intent of tonight's presentation was also, if you're seeing, we're live typing notes here in Google Slides for you all. So is to add in additional metrics. And so I don't know if you want to delete number of individuals participating in programs. I think maybe that might have been a metric of how many people are participating in the planting, or I don't know. But maybe a metric to suggest could be number of trees planted in Portside, and also
Correct.
amount of grant funding, outside funding raised for urban greening in Portside. Is there any other metrics that you would like to propose?
Yes, collective support of ongoing projects. So I think it's good with the advocacy, but just a clear example, the tree projects that are going on in our community, it's already being funded, right? And so just like implementing it into the different stakeholder organizations for them to help promote something that already is granted. So I think that's very much a low hanging fruit that'll just, the success of those projects or those small grants or large, however they are, will then assure that we're able to get more grants through our collective, through those organizations or through the community effort. So I want to once something succeeds, like these projects, then it's just going to attract more of that.
So would that be number of projects supported by the steering committee and the SDAPCD? If I'm understanding that right? Trying to think of a metric as something that we can quantify or we can track. What is it that we want to track?
Supported and promoted.
Project supported and promoted. Perfect. And SD is my abbreviation for the steering committee. Great. Okay, so if you have other ideas for other metrics, this is the goal. This is the activity for tonight. So we have till 6:55 for this, and I do see that we have Ted, Jack, and Larry in that order next. And if you have any comments or questions, go ahead and raise your hands. And with that, we'll go to Ted.
Sure. Thank you, Domingo. That was just a huge amount of work. I appreciate it. And thank you, Janice, for your ideas. Can we look at slide with A4, Environmental Justice Office? It's very early in the... There we go. So I'd like to suggest a metric here that there's the development of a scope of work or an operations plan for the office of EJ.
That's a great metric, Ted. And actually, if I may refine it a little bit, because we're working on that, we're calling it a framework. So maybe we can add it like that, and development of a framework for the Office of Environmental Justice.
Yeah, that works for me. Framework. I said scope of work.
Here, up here in A2 or down here?
Yeah, right there. On I'm sorry, no, A4, I believe it is.
A4.
Oh, A4, sorry, okay.
So development of a framework for the Office of Environmental Justice.
And that is all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted.
And I think I said Jack was next, so go ahead, Jack.
Thank you, Daniela. Yeah, a lot of work, Domingo, and a lot of good places to start with. In the interest of time, A2, just wondered, would you just elaborate a little briefly on what the public participation is envisioned in that? Is it just in the SERP or is it other things as well? And if so, what are those?
You think that's a great question. Thank you, Jack. So this is a public participation plan for the entire APCD and for the entire region. What we're trying to accomplish with this is to increase participation of members of the community and especially disadvantaged communities in decision-making processes for APCD. So, for example, looking at when we have a rule development, are we getting enough feedback from members of the community? Does the community know what those rules will accomplish for the community? When we're talking about our board hearings, are we reaching enough members of the public with our hearings? Do they know about the hearings, etc.? So it's a number of activities that will be included, basically everything where we interact with the public, and it's region-wide, not specific to Portside. It's regional. Okay, thank you. That's great. Skipping down to C4, proposed amendment of District Rule 1401. I just wondered what the relevance of that item is to the SERP, and it doesn't really amount to emission reductions. So maybe, although maybe I'm missing something. I don't quite understand how that would amount to any sort of emission reduction. And actually for this one, let me see if we have one of our team members in the meeting. Hold on one second. Let me see. And is Angela connected? Angela? I don't see her. So
it's Rob Ryder. I can weigh in a little bit.
Oh, thank you, Rob.
Yeah, sure. Excuse me, let me turn on my video. Yeah, Jack. So you're right. That pertains to ozone pollution, which is a region-wide pollutant, that rule, we would be lowering the threshold to require small, lower emitting stationary sources, still big stationary sources, but lower emitting than currently to get a federal permit. You're right that the permit itself doesn't necessarily result in emission reductions, but it is increased outreach and engagement because the federal permitting process has public noticing requirements and those kinds of things. If there are sources in the Portside community that have to get a federal permit, then I guess there would be some benefit to the Portside community through their awareness of the permitting actions, but it's a little bit nebulous. I will acknowledge that point. And I probably just spoke over the heads of a lot of folks because it's very inside. I'm sorry for that, but it's our Rule 1401 pertains to federal permits. So we issue local air pollution control district permits, but if the stationary source is emits large enough pollution, then the Federal Clean Air Act requires a federal permit to be issued to that source, in addition to the local APCD permit. So we're looking to amend that rule to require additional facilities to be subject to federal permit requirements. So that's what that rule is about, and it's part of the Clean Air Act. Forgive me if I did not answer your question.
Just want to say at the end of the day, does it really have a emission reduction impact on the community?
It does require self-reporting of violations, and in some cases they have to do some additional emissions monitoring, but it is largely, I think, it largely opens up the permitting process to the public. So it's more of an awareness strategy, I think, than an emission reduction strategy, because it is an additional permit in addition to the existing permit. So by itself, it may not result in large emission reductions, but it is intended to increase the public's awareness. So when they get a federal permit, there's additional noticing requirements and outreach requirements. So I guess it brings a little bit more awareness in the community to the source, but it doesn't necessarily, the permit itself doesn't result in emission reductions, only because we're already permitting the source and enforcing the source. So you're right that it's not a clear emission reduction goal per se, but there is some community benefit. At least the intent was to raise awareness within the community when a source is getting a permit, because the federal permit has a lot of outreach, well, more outreach associated with it. So it's a gray area, Jack. I agree with you that it's not clear that it results in a lot, but I would defer to the community, perhaps those that may be familiar.
And maybe just for the purpose of our conversation, I typed in here, metrics could be maybe a number of self-reported violations, of is a typo, or number of notifications to the community, or
great, Daniela, that works for me. Yeah, that seems to make sense, but we'll see what the community thinks. Thanks a lot.
If I may offer a thought here, Robin, please correct me if I'm wrong, but you mentioned as part of this rule, those entities that are meeting a certain threshold, I'm assuming, or are crossing a certain threshold, would then be required to get the federal permit. So wouldn't there be an incentive in that sense for those emitters not to cross that threshold, and in that sense not to increase emissions in the community? So I think that from that perspective, we can capture the emission component of it, right?
So maybe it's number of facilities, not or not getting the EPA permit, triggering the EPA permit, or how would you track that as a metric?
It's possible, just by the way you wrote it, there are facilities that will come in and say, we don't want to get a federal permit, so we're gonna make sure our permit is capped at a certain, not to exceed a certain emissions level. So you're right, Domingo, there is benefit in that regard. It's a disincentive to emit. And we may be able to track the number of facilities that are coming in to cap their emissions to avoid a federal Title V permit. Yeah, it's kind of, this is new territory for us. So, we want feedback on this approach too.
Great. So I'm just going to put this in red to flag it so we can move on, just because we have a long agenda today.
Sounds good.
I'll put things that we need flag in orange, but I did propose some metrics here that we can go back to. So next, Mayeni, did you have a comment on this or something else? If it's something else, I'll take you later, but if it's on this, you can jump in real quick.
I offer some suggestions. Can you hear me?
Yeah, but very faint.
Okay, well, go ahead and move on. Then,
okay, perfect. And you can always put things in the chat too. So I think next is Larry and then Commissioner Naranjo.
Hi, good evening, everyone, and Domingo and to the SERP subcommittee, good work on this. Thanks for all your hard work. I did have one question on strategy B1, if we can jump to that real quick. And the reason why I bring this up is I feel like the metrics that we're identifying there, I'm not sure if they're really hitting the mark. I know one of the things that we've heard from our tenants, particularly with cargo handling equipment, that the existing Carl Moyer program really doesn't give them enough money to swap out their equipment. So there were 4 pieces of equipment I know that we looked at last year in 2020, November, and I think that we only got about 5% of what was only about 5% of the total cost was eligible for grant funding. So I don't know what the rest of the people or what other attendees or steering committee members think, but maybe one suggestion would be here is the percentage or the amount of the percentage of funding for projects that are identified in the SERP as a metric, because as you went through earlier, there were 20 pieces of cargo handling equipment that we're targeting to upgrade and replace. And again, if we could kind of get an award amount from 5%, to the 70 to 80%, I think that would be a good metric in terms of adding some flexibility for those mobile sources, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you, Larry. I think that makes sense.
So I don't know if you want me to maybe percentage of, or maybe target, 70, maybe let's go target 80% of grant awards to projects identified in the SERP or something. Something to that effect. I think that at least kind of speaks to, I think, some of our tenants' concerns about trying to get some additional money to swap out electric equipment. Thank you.
Great. You want to go ahead, Sandy?
Yeah, I'll be real quick. So my recommendation for A2, as far as the number of individuals to recruit to participate, I would actually put a number. At least put benchmarks of numbers of how many community members you want to have participate. Second, for A4, thank you, Domingo, for addressing that you'll be doing a framework as far as for the Office of Environmental Justice. I would recommend and some wording about the collaboration with the new policy that Vice Chair Nora Vargas is introducing tomorrow at the board meeting, which is a county-wide Office of Environmental and Climate Justice. So making sure that the frameworks are in line and that aligning the resources needed to have an effective office and engagement within the Portside environmental justice community. And that's the end of my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Naranjo. So Daniela, on that one, maybe you can add alignment of framework with regional county office.
I would like to add to this, just based on our last, one of the last meetings regarding Portside use of Pepper Park, is to include, and based on a request from the Kumeyaay Indigenous leaders to be included and invited to the table based on development or anything regarding the environment.
So within that, should that be like a consultation? I'm wondering if that goes on A2 for like how to engage, like a consultation policy for the tribe, or?
I think that is more in line with the public participation plan, perhaps. So maybe we can say under, that's A2, yes, A2. So maybe we can specifically say inclusion of tribal, yes, or tribal communities, right?
Would that be right? Janice, does that look good? We can wordsmith later, I think.
Yes,
too.
wordsmith later, tribal
Okay.
consultation, even with, yeah.
And for this one, Sandy, on A2, what you had suggested, I had put this little edit here, but I'm also thinking, Domingo, maybe one thing we can wordsmith is either a number or maybe also like an increased percentage, or like, so maybe we could wordsmith later to like increase of like 25%, or I don't know, like an X number.
Right. We can try and tie it perhaps to a percentage, because a number would be hard to, I guess. I mean, it would vary depending on activity, right?
Yes. And Joy, I know that you had a comment texted in the comment. Do you want to maybe unmute? And I think it goes back to what Larry was talking about on the port.
Yeah, I was just trying to figure out what's a metric to quantify increased flexibility. And I like the one you suggested, but I thought also of, how many grants or pieces of equipment or something that were given out that would not have been eligible before, we made the criteria more flexible. So I wanted to add that.
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh, that's right.
Okay. And that was which one? That was in incentives, right?
Yes. So maybe number of projects funded that wouldn't have been eligible without the flexibility.
Yeah, that would work.
There you go.
Perfect. Great. Are there any, next in line, Jack, go ahead.
Thank you. Real quick, recommendation on B2, reduce emissions from passenger vehicles. And maybe you had this or something like this in there, Domingo. We were kind of going fast there, but in addition to actually looking at the number of tons of emissions reduced through incentive programs, I think if maybe the community would have a greater interest in actually seeing reduction in measured emissions measured at sampling stations in the community. In other words, what are the sampling stations showing that reductions are doing in the community? Are they going up? Are they going down? Are they actually showing the improvement that we would expect from these incentive programs? So just that would be my suggestion for B2.
Okay, great. And Joy, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind everybody that the draft SERP does include the overall goals at the beginning of Chapter 7. And so we need to develop metrics for those too. And maybe they're specific enough that it's kind of obvious what they would be, but just to make sure that we're going back and tracking those, even though, as we all know, they're not enforceable. I mean, they're a way to track the progress and meeting our overall goals as the SERP is implemented. So we want to keep those in the metrics too.
Thank you, Joy. That's a good point. And I think that a lot of the metrics and the actions will feed into the goals of the SERP, because a lot of actually pretty much all of the goals of the SERP are related to all of these different actions. So we can take a look at all of the metrics that we're capturing here and see how those apply to the goals, and we can cover those that way. And if there's anything that's missing, then we can work to identify a specific metric for the goal.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Wonderful. So we're at time for this item. I wanted just to make sure if anyone, any of our community's residents have any, or stakeholders have any comments or last additions to any of these metrics. No? Okay, so maybe Tree, if you go to the last slide, I just put a quick slide together right now. So just next steps is given Joy's last comment.
Hand raised.
Oh, who has their hand raised?
Sylvia.
Oh, I don't see it on my end. Go ahead, Sylvia, sorry.
Yes, sorry, it was a little delay there. But really
come up on my
quickly, just a consideration to look into. It's probably out there, but I needed to include this, is perhaps in a strategy A2, I believe, in regards to including residents with mental health illness when it's outreach, perhaps adding trauma-informed care in there too. The reason why is many of our veterans and active military have PTSD and other illnesses that we need to be very careful how to approach certain, especially when it comes to emergencies and other incidents. So something to look into as well.
Thank you. That's a great suggestion.
Perfect. Great. Any other suggestions? Okay. Well, so for next steps, so if there's no other hands up or comments, you can also, if you can't find your hand tool, you can just unmute and make a comment if you're a panelist. If you're a stakeholder in attendee mode, if you want to raise your hand, if you have a question or comment. But if not, we'll go to the last slide, Shui, on slide 19. And just next steps are, we will, so Joy discussed developing metrics for the overall goals. And then we'll take so if you'll see, I typed everything in dark blue. So we will go back with Domingo and his team will go back and they will wordsmith that and incorporate that into the SERP. Is that right, Domingo? Any other next steps that you want us to capture?
No, that's correct. There's certainly more work on the metrics that needs to be done. And like I said, we probably won't be able to capture absolutely everything that was suggested, but we have to take a look at what are the metrics that are more closely tied to the desired outcome of the action and focus on those. Thank you everybody for all of the input, and we certainly look forward to continue to work on this. And by the time we have this presentation, the presentation of the final SERP, we'll have all of the final metrics included in the plan.
Great, awesome. Well, thank you, Domingo. And so that will bring us to our next item on the agenda, which is Kathy Keehan will be leading us through, which is an exercise to start developing with the priority projects, identifying the types of projects we want to prioritize for the SERP. So for today, we're also going to be using a new tool for this activity, which is called Mentimeter. And so with that, I'm going to spotlight, Shui, if you could spotlight our colleague Joanie Leiva, who is going to walk everybody through how you can access this Mentimeter poll. For the presentation, there'll be 2 polls. And I will stop there and hand it over to Joanie.
Good evening, everyone. We're going to be doing some live polling and voting today through Mentimeter. Mentimeter is just a website that gives us a couple more features and flexibility than Zoom polling does. And you'll be able to join today either through your laptop, your computer, or your phone. If you're currently on a laptop or computer, we recommend using your phone just so that way you can have 2 separate screens going, but any of your devices is fine. So if everyone could open a separate tab on whatever device you prefer and go to menti.com, that's MENTI.com. And when you open that screen, you'll be prompted, oh, someone already started voting. You'll be prompted to enter a code. The code is 2172399.
Joanie, did you want to put that into the chat? Sorry.
Yeah. So I just entered in the chat a link that I'll just take you directly there, or also the code one more time. And that'll just take you to the first question. And we're going to run through that really quick. As you can see, some people already started voting. Our practice question for today is just, what's your favorite color? And we have a couple of options. Okay, wow, a lot of blue. Okay, I'm just gonna go for 10 more seconds. And you only have to do this once tonight. Menti will just automatically take you to whatever question is next in the presentation. But if you do accidentally click out for whatever reason, you just go back to the website and we'll have the code up. Okay. 10 more seconds. Looks like blue one.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay, so if you do have any questions, you can just drop them in the chat or just send me a direct message. I'll stay on here and I'll turn it to Kathy now.
Thank you. I'm glad everyone likes the color of clean air. That's why I think we're so fond of blue. So tonight, like we've been talking about at a couple of the previous meetings, we'd like to get some feedback from all of you about how we should think about prioritizing the community identified incentive projects. So let's go to the next slide and we'll talk a little bit about what that means. So you know that the SERP has a whole series of actions and processes, and some of those are incentives. And we want to get, there's a process that we need to go through to work with ARB, the Air Resources Board, to have them approve our flexibility in that, or to approve spending dollars on things that are not our regular MOIR or kind of standard projects. So we want to think outside the box tonight about what kinds of things we could do, and what those things that we've put together in the SERP, what are the most important things to help us focus, because we can't do everything all at once. So we want to pick what's most important to start with. And just to remind folks, we have about $10 million in available funding that we're talking about spending through this community identified projects process. So I would say not to worry too much about how much things cost, because we have some money available, but to think about what's most important to you and the things that you'd like to see happen. So next slide, please. So we went through the SERP and looked at some of the projects that made sense to be incentive projects. And that was things like the electric truck pilot project, like air filtration in schools or homes, like, focusing on zero emission port equipment, or urban greening, or clean cars, or fueling infrastructure. There were some actions about where do we do truck parking and staging and charging, and how do we modify our existing incentive programs, like you were just talking about in the last item, to say, how do we change our programs to allow more people to qualify for enough incentive funding to make sense for them to move on that. And then we know there are other SERP projects. So if your favorite SERP project is not on this list, but you think it makes sense to have some incentive funding, it has an incentives connection, we'd like to hear about that tonight. Next slide, please. So I put together a quick table. Thank you, whoever formatted this. It looks much better than it did when I did it. So thank you. On those actions, I wanted to give a little context about, some things cost more than others. Some things are more difficult for the district to do than others. When it says that difficulty in that second column, that's not really overall difficulty. That's the difficulty for us. How big a stretch is it for us to do that? We did a very rough kind of estimate of, will there be emission reductions from that project? Will there be exposure reductions? Will people be, it may not reduce the overall pollution, but it may provide a barrier or a buffer or some protection from whatever pollution is being created potentially. And then the last column, I just tried to put a few other benefits of these various projects, because we are thinking about new things. And so it's, traditionally we've looked at emission reductions, old equipment, new equipment, do the math, all done. But for a lot of these projects that we're thinking about, they bring additional benefits to the community or to businesses. And so it's things like demonstrating that zero emission equipment will work, like the electric truck pilot project, that we expect that getting those electric trucks into the community and into the hands of businesses will help encourage other businesses to do that as well. Or some of these projects, again, like air filtration, it protects residents who are living in the community. urban greening park space and plants and green areas has GHG benefits, as greenhouse gas benefits, that those plants are absorbing some carbon, hopefully out of the air. So things like that, I just put on that slide to get the creative juices flowing about what we might want to do. So I was just going to pop to the next slide. So we are going to do, at this point, we want to do an exercise, a little brainstorming about what is most important for you. So instead of just thinking about, you know, of those CERT projects, what are the most, is there a next slide on this? I'm not sure if there is. I think I had a little bit of text. Oops.
It just flipped over it.
Okay. All right. So, so what we do is, what we'd like to have you think about is, what are the important things that you want to see coming with those incentive funds. So it could be things like clean air or zero emissions or protection or greenhouse gases or equity or being local, or, you know, whatever words resonate with you, so that we could take that into account when we're trying to do things. And I think, Joanne, correct me if I'm wrong, you can enter more than one word.
Yeah, so please go ahead and use the Menti again. So if you looked at the Menti and if you refresh it, you should see the question. You can enter your word. And muy bien, Margarita. Yeah, word or a short phrase works too.
Yeah.
And if for any reason Menti isn't working for you, you can enter that in the chat. So I'm going to enter Margarita's, actually.
Thank you.
And if it's not working for you, just refresh your slide.
Thank you so much, you guys, for keep typing. If there's things that are important, don't give up yet.
And if you want to chat, write into the chat your words, I can post them into the Menti for you. Okay, and 10-second countdown.
It doesn't allow you to put more words.
Oh, what words would you like to add? Let me know.
I'll do it. I'm just saying it's frustrating. It doesn't allow you to put in what you want.
That is frustrating.
But you can share with us. Share with us.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in doing that right now.
Okay. Sorry, Josie. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't mean to be rude. I'm sorry.
No, you're not. You're not.
I'm just trying to get it out of me, and it's just not allowing me to.
Aire limpio y cero tóxicos, clean air and zero toxics. Thank you, Alicia.
This is Jorge. Can I ask you ability help?
Okay.
Great. Okay, so should we go on to the next slide?
Well, let's look at this just for a minute.
Okay.
Just so people could absorb kind of what people typed in. It looks like people are really excited about electric trucks, and about equity, and about zero emissions, and about science and clean air. But there's a lot of other things that we're interested in as well. You know, community gardens and EV infrastructure, and making sure those benefits are local, and electrification. So we're going to save this word cloud, and it's going to help us when we're trying to set those priorities. But yeah, if we can go to the next slide.
Kathleen, Can I
Yes,
ask a question? So what
absolutely.
we just put in the Menti program, is that what was showing up on the slide there?
It is.
Can you go back to that slide one more time?
I'm hoping Joanne can.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Yes, we can. We can.
No, if
We
you
can.
it's fine.
Yeah, we can. I think, right, Jordan?
Okay, thank you.
Of course. Yeah, and I'm glad you did that, Josephine, because our next slide, I'm hoping that we can talk a little bit about some of those words that we went through kind of what were those most popular words. I'd really like to have some of you share if I didn't say those words, or if I did, why those words are important to you all. It's important for us to hear why those things are important to people. So I'd love it if someone would tell me a little bit about what word they picked and why.
Well, I'll start.
Thank you.
I was so rude last time.
You were not rude. It's okay.
Not rude.
I know myself. That was rude. But I picked, of course, the obvious one, clean air. And clean air primarily because when my mother lived here, towards the end of her life, I know that she was really having difficult with breathing related issues, and she hadn't had them. And I've been back for about 3 years in my mom's house. And since I've come back, I now have serious allergies. I mean, I'm walking around all the time with Kleenex. My eyes are, if I don't take a Claritin, which I don't like taking medicine, I'm leaking everywhere. So.
Thank you. That's exactly the kind of feedback that I was looking for, to hear people's stories about why those words are important to them. Would someone else like to share?
Margarita, quizás, ¿gusta hacer su comentario?
Bueno, yo estoy de acuerdo con lo que dice la señora acerca del aire limpio, porque si hay menos emisiones, hay más cosas verdes, más árboles, eso va a ayudar a toda la comunidad. Yo tengo un hijo que tiene asma y él batalla mucho por tanta contaminación y seguido se enferma. Y pienso que es importante para todos que haya un aire limpio para todos. Gracias.
Thank you.
And just a reminder for all the monolingual English speakers to click the English channel on the interpretation so that you can hear the simultaneous interpretation of our comments in Spanish this evening. So, muchas gracias, Margarita. And thank you, Frida, for your interpretation.
It looked like Sylvia, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I do like to agree, or actually I do agree with Ms. Talamantes when she says she's dripping. It's kind of similar to my situation. I do get a lot of yucky stuff in my throat because of my asthma due to various factors, and one of them is just the climate change surrounding that. Also, my mother, she gets teary all the time because I'm not sure that's a good question. I need to follow up with it. But so there's different factors why I picked cleaner air, because it is affecting my family and it's affecting little children. It's really harsh to see them, have a difficult time to control that. So thank you for the space.
Thank you. Thank you for contributing. I think it looked like Alicia was next.
And a reminder to click English so that you can hear the interpretation.
Yo puse esta frase, cero tóxicos, más aire limpio, porque con tanto tóxico que hay aquí cerca de mi casa, por los barcos y por los camiones, se agrava más la salud de mi esposo, que lo tengo delicado del cáncer. Gracias.
Thank you, Alicia, for sharing that. Ted, looked like you had your hand up.
Yes, I put the word beautification on the list because I feel that a lot of these things are covered. If we had a space for the trucks to park somewhere, they would be off the street and in front of a home. Urban greening would cover a very good action to beautify our community. Of course, clean air, clean water, and just a healthy, a beautiful place to live. And it takes our work, right? It's not beauty, it's beautification.
Yes, we have to work to make things more beautiful.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ted. We have a couple of more things that we want to talk about, but I want to leave space. Is there more? Does anyone else want to share why they picked particular words or phrases before we move on?
Well, I can. The other two that I picked was electrification of the port, which we're moving towards, and then the third one was how do you say, enforcement of a neighborhood without trucks.
Okay.
Or, enforcing the truck route to go around the neighborhood rather than through it.
Gotcha. It is tricky with that word cloud that you can't do it's hard to do a big long thing. So thank you for elaborating on that.
And I'm not a good wordsmith.
Under the 30-second pressure to type something in. Yeah. I'm happy to take feedback. You guys can always send me an email or call me on the phone if you'd like to give more other feedback. So we know that not everybody works in this process. So, okay. If there's nobody else that wants to do it, we're going to run through another exercise with you guys. And I think there's another slide here, maybe. Oh, okay. So
on the PowerPoint, do you want the other PowerPoint slide?
Is there, I thought there was one that talked about the choices before we jumped into the prioritization.
Go back, Cherie, go back. Go back. Is it this one?
There we go. Yeah. So what we're going to ask you to do now is Mentimeter is going to give you an option for ranking these things from what you find most important to what you think would be less important. We know that they're all important. So I don't want to give the impression that we think none of these are important. They are all important, and that's why they're all in the SERP. But what we'd like to do is find out what you would like us to start with. So, so we're going to take this list of projects and we're going to go on to Mentimeter, and it's going to give you the option, I hope, to rank them so we can get a sense of what you all think are the things that we should work on first. Oh, and look at you guys already voting. Awesome.
Go ahead, Joy. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question for Kathy.
Sure.
Is there was one for port equipment. Does that include hovercraft? Or was that just like cargo handling equipment?
I think that's a really good question, Joy, and I'm not certain of the answer. I think for this exercise, I would encourage you to consider those marine vessels as port equipment, even though they don't really belong to the port or the port does not have any control over them. But let's put them in there. But I'm going to make a note that we should be more specific and ask specifically about the marine vessels. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
I just find this fascinating as you guys are doing this, that to be able to watch it move.
And there's a question, if you could expand on fueling infrastructure.
Sure. Yeah, so when we're talking about fueling infrastructure, we're talking about specifically projects that put in either chargers for electric vehicles, either heavy duty or lighter, like cars, or maybe natural gas fueling infrastructure or hydrogen fueling infrastructure, someplace where as we transition to these pieces of equipment that don't use diesel anymore, how do we make sure they get the fuel that they do need, whether that's electricity or hydrogen or something else? Does that make sense? Hopefully.
Yeah, that was my question. Thank you, Kathy.
Sure.
Great. So should we do a countdown, Johnny? 10 seconds. Has everyone been able to get it to vote? Again, if not, you can always email or you can use the chat and we can incorporate your rankings.
Okay. Awesome. This is really good. Thank you, guys. Nice to see that you're acknowledging the importance of all of the projects. We have votes on all of the projects, so thank you for that. It looks like we have very strong interest in air filtration in homes and schools, very strong interest in the electric truck pilot project, which is no surprise. We've been talking about that for a while, so I'm glad to see that I'm not crazy thinking that that was going to be an important priority for all of you. And then the zero emission port equipment to be able to create some way of incentivizing zero emission port equipment. And then as we go down, truck parking, urban greening, modifying our existing incentive programs, clean vehicles, like clean automobiles, fueling infrastructure, and other CERP projects. Awesome. Do we have a next slide in the PowerPoint, hopefully? I think there's just a couple more and then we'll be done with this exercise. I want to thank you all for your patience and willingness to do the high-tech process. It's our first time, so appreciate that. So we're going to take that information that we've done today, and we're going to take a look at how we can translate that into the bureaucratic stuff that we need to do to get those kind of things approved as we move the community emission reduction plan through the process. What our goal is to have at least 3 of those projects outlined so that when the emission reduction program is adopted by the Air Resources Board, we'll be ready to move and release incentive programs that reflect your community priorities. And so that's our goal. We'll be coming back to you in the next few months, probably next month, because next month is all about the CERP. But after that, to come back with some of the work that we've done to make sure we're on the right track as we go along. So are there any questions before we wrap this up? If not, I just want to thank you all again for your willingness to share and to tell your stories and to participate in our little high tech. I think it went pretty successfully. Thank you, Daniela, for calming my nerves that this was not going to work. So thank you all for all of your input and support, and we'll continue to talk about these over the next few months.
Well, all the credit goes to my colleague, Joanny Leva, and our colleague, Chewy, who are the Mentee king and queen. So thank you guys for making that smooth. And if steering committee members liked it, we can incorporate that into more of our meetings. And thank you, Ashley Tremonti Rocia. You recommended it a year ago and we finally used it. Great.
Daniela,
so with that,
can I ask, sorry for the interruption. Can we add to the meeting notes the results that we received from the Mentimeter, those graphs? Perfect.
Yes, we will do that. Yes. Great. So with that, it's over to you, Domingo, for the next item, which is you and Vernon, actually from ARB, to give a little bit more background around the air toxics modeling and the next steps there.
Thank you. And I put together a slide. Let's just go to the next slide. This slide.
We broke it up into 2, Domingo.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Basically just summarizes some of the initial objectives that we have in mind for the toxics risk modeling exercise that CARB is helping us with. And these are some of the items that we can focus on through that modeling is as we look to answer some of the questions, for the community, whether, it's related to the level of exposure or the sources of emissions or just the quantifying the risk, etc. So we wanted to bring these up to the steering committee just for some additional feedback. We received some initial feedback from the SERP subcommittee, and we also reached out to the land use subcommittee. And you can see in red some of the additions from the input that we received. And we just wanted to make sure that these were run by the steering committee. And if everybody agrees with these objectives, then CARB can start working on a plan on how to proceed, documenting how we're proceeding with the modeling so that we can meet all of these objectives. And can we go to the next slide just to show the other group? Here you go. So as you see on the slide, again, those are related to prioritizing health risks, identifying the health risks, and also informing some of our additional actions or goals. I know there are some goals in the SERP that are contingent upon the results of the modeling. So again, if anybody has any questions on these objectives, or if you think that there's something else that we should be capturing as part of the modeling, you can bring it up and we can discuss it. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Vernon to see if he has any comments on this or any clarifications.
Yeah, thanks, Domingo. Yeah, this is Vernon Hughes. Can everybody hear and see me okay? We can hear you. Okay, very good. Yeah, Domingo, I think you covered it there. Ultimately, this is, Action A3 has built within it developing a plan. So, after getting your feedback here, and really appreciate the feedback that's been received, that helps clarify really what you're looking for and what we would need to do to accomplish your objectives. So then, next, essentially putting pen to paper, writing a plan, working through, for instance, changes to the emission inventory inputs, those kind of changes to the modeling. Can it be done in time? Is the data available? That helps us think through this more specifically. And then, that plan could certainly be run back through subcommittees. We would certainly work with the Air District and subcommittees or steering committee at your pleasure on how you want to do this. But next steps, I think, prudent steps would be putting a plan together.
Great, and I see that Jack Monger has his hand up. So you guys ready for questions and feedback? Great, go ahead, Jack. And if anyone else, again, has a question or comment, and if you're in attendee mode also, you can feel free to raise your hand.
Thank you, Daniela. Just a question about F and G, asking for a little more explanation in terms of what those mean.
Sure. So for complementing the data from the monitoring network, as you know, we're collecting data from our monitoring sites in the Portside community. And what this model will help us do is basically fill in the gaps, right? Because the monitoring sites collect, can only provide so much coverage for the community. So the models can help us look at the area as a whole and basically fill in the gaps where the monitoring network is not able to capture some of the data. And then for G, further informing cancer risk reduction goals for Portside community, goals related to cancer risk reduction. I believe it was goal 2 and goal 3, and they are related to cancer risk reduction goals from specific activities based on what the modeling says. So the modeling can provide a baseline and then help us inform those goals where we had to fill in the blanks for the reduction that we're looking for.
Okay,
great.
thank you.
Any other questions or comments or feedback? Something you don't understand, or I see Akshita has her hand up, so go ahead. You can unmute yourself and proceed.
Great, thank you. I just had a clarifying question. I know so this is going back to F. I know you mentioned the regulatory monitors, but is there any consideration for the purple layer monitors that STPCD is also deploying? How are those working in tandem? Could you say a little more about the purple layer monitors versus the regulatory monitors? Thank you.
Sure. So I don't have a lot of information right now on those monitors, but I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that those are not included as part of the data as part of the inputs for the modeling. If that's what your question was getting at.
Yeah, I was trying to get a better understanding of what is the scope of what gets into these models. And as we're talking about like filling in missing data, how are we doing like source attribution at the area level? And what is the role of regulatory monitors, purple layer monitors, and the models in combination? So,
got it.
This is
more of
Vernon.
a Vernon. Yeah.
Yeah, a couple comments on that. So with regard to source attribution, this goal, this action A3, is not a source attribution goal per se. While G, it does inform risk reduction goals going forward, but it's not from a SERP strategy perspective or the technical assessment perspective, isn't intended for source attribution. I think the inventory was the approach taken there. And then on F, with regard to the monitoring network, there's two pieces here. And I think Jeremy Avis, when he presented the preliminary modeling and had the discussion with you on that, the models you can validate the models also. So if there are air quality data readily available when the modeling is completed, comparing against monitor results is a way to get confidence in the models producing acceptable results. So that's called model performance evaluation. And that's something typically with regulatory grade monitors that are used. So with purple air sensor type monitors, there are some processes in terms of I just lost the term, to compare essentially what's being measured with a sensor versus a regulatory grade monitor. So there's monitoring objectives in the community air monitoring plan for why, say you use a sensor versus a regulatory grade monitor, what's the objective behind that? So that's something that needs to be taken into account as well, if that makes sense.
yeah, no, it absolutely does. Thank you so much. That's helpful.
Okay.
Great, and we have the next comment from Larry. So Larry, go ahead.
Yeah, really quick. Just want to say, maybe if we can go back a slide, Domingo, when we're looking at, the relative contribution of different sources. I know that the port, I know we've spoken to both you and Vernon about providing you port-related emission data from our inventory for our 2 marine terminals. I guess I would just encourage us to the extent possible to try to make sure that we also have a realistic picture of a lot of those other sources, including some of the emissions from the freeways. as well as federal sources, if there's any way that we can estimate some of the emissions associated with the Navy base. I just think that'll give us a more complete picture in terms of all of the different sources that are contributing. So just want to make that comment if that's possible and if that's within the work plan.
Yeah, Domingo, do you want me to weigh in here, or do you want to?
Sure. Yeah. Yes, please.
Yeah, that is something, Larry, as you're aware, the SERP subcommittee did meet with the port and talk through some of the MCAS work that you're doing. So, in this work plan, updating the inventory to the extent that time allows and that data are available, it should be part of the work plan. We did meet also with SANDAG, with Elise, one of the steering committee members this morning. So the Metropolitan Planning Agency that's responsible for mobile source travel type of data, and just talk through similarly like we did on port sources, the availability of data, maybe more accurate data, more accurate approaches to distribute mobile sources. So again, taking a look at how can we improve the inventory inputs into the modeling to make them as representative as possible, given the time allowed, and then also caveating the quality of the data as well.
Great, thank you.
All right, any more questions or comments for Vernon or Domingo? Okay, I don't see any hands coming up, or I don't hear any voices going off mute. So Domingo, do you want to maybe just walk through the next steps? And
sure, thank you, Daniela. So what we're going to do is we're going to take these objectives, and then CARB is going to start developing a scope or a plan, just documenting what the model will try to accomplish as far as the different questions that we would like answered with the model. Also the different inputs that go into the model, and then the process to getting the data available. So we were talking about a goal for completing this model by the end of the calendar year. So as you know, in the coming months, we will continue to provide updates and bring any items to the steering committee that when we have more information to share.
great, all right. And Vernon, anything else? No, you're good. Thank you for joining us tonight and for sharing all that information. That's great. Well, I have good news for everybody. We're ahead of the schedule here on the agenda. So this is the part of the agenda that we're usually rushing to, but this is the part that's reserved for any questions or comments that on any item that was not on tonight's meeting agenda. So that can be from members who are in attendee mode, or who from our steering committee or Air District staff. So I don't know if does anybody have a comment or question. I see Liliana from ARB. Go ahead, Liliana. And I see Sandy, Commissioner Naranjo after that. So go ahead, Liliana, then Sandy.
Hi, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Liliana Nunez with the Office of Community Air Protection at CARB. And as the SERP, you, the CSE, and the district are working on is close to being finalized, and it's anticipated to go to the San Diego APCD board for adoption in July. We at CARB, we're starting to think about potential dates for our board to consider approval of the SERP. Currently, we have a tentative date for October 14th. And usually our board items to consider the SERP start no earlier than 4 p.m. So we anticipate getting the district's final submittal in August, and that's when CARB staff will begin our review process. And this includes evaluating the SERP against AB 617 requirements and the blueprint criteria, a CARB workshop to understand the community's thoughts on the SERP, and developing a staff report to present to our board with our staff's recommendations. So once again, we're tentatively planning on holding the board meeting to consider the SERP's approval on Thursday, October 14th. So please let me know if there are any major issues with the specific date. I will also add my email in the chat.
I have a question. Is that meeting Zoom? Oh, well, maybe it'll be in person by then, but is it in Sacramento or in San Diego?
So typically those back before, in the before days, we used to, our board used to actually go into the community for whose SERP they were considering. Right now, we are thinking it's still going to be remote over Zoom, but definitely we wish if it's available for us to be able to go to the community.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I have a public comment. Y'all probably aren't ready to hear this, but I just have
who is
to.
this? Sorry,
This is Janice. Janice Luna.
Oh,
thank you.
Okay.
Yes. So my comment is, with all respect to the communities and the disparities that we face, just keeping in mind, and this is for a future topic because change really has to go in this direction. The term is regulatory arbitrage. And so while we are advocating for electrification because it will benefit, the residents that have been disenfranchised that are dealing with asthma, which is our EJ communities, we also understand the practices of the mining in indigenous communities. So when we go into mass electrification, there is extermination of indigenous communities that are displaced for that lithium. So I just want to drop that seed because we need to move in that direction where and really consider those EJ communities in the future. While we make these changes, that should be the next change in the next decade or so if it's not too late. It weighs heavy on my heart hearing grandparents and indigenous, abuelos and abuelas speaking of this happening in Argentina and Bolivia. So just for us to, pray and put that intention and know that it's not the best solution. Carbon emission is important, but that's not the only footprint that impacts the lives of EJ communities such as our relatives. Thank you.
I have a comment to that too.
Okay, go ahead, Josephine.
Well, I'm just wondering, I think that's a valid point. And is there any way that we can include that as maybe not specifically right now, but at least a goal that we're going towards?
What would be the goal again?
Well, what Janice was speaking about, when it goes into mining for lithium and all, if any of that is in this environment, in our region, I don't know that it is, but I think that's a valid point to be concerned about, world health impacts on our indigenous communities worldwide.
Yeah, so I don't know. The purpose of the steering committee has really been the SERP is focused on the Portside community, which is small. So understanding what the intersections are there, but also the district is a region-wide entity. So I know in the Salton Sea, there's some issues related to that, but that's South Coast Air Quality District. I don't know if there's impact, but thank you for raising that. And
yeah, thank you. And to clarify, this is in South America, but I just don't want us to be insensitive. We're intelligent, creative, people that know what it is like to suffer. And so to just place that, one day that can be the goal is, when we're electrifying, to understand where those materials are coming from and what is it causing for other community members. And so how do we harm less? Just to benefit us, we want to make sure, is there a way to have a higher standard of health equity for everyone? Thank you.
Right, in the broader life cycle. Thank you. That's a good point. Electrification is clean for us and not clean for others in other ways. Great. So with that, I think Sandy and then Sarah, or Commissioner Naranjo, go ahead.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'll just be really brief. I first of all want to thank every single one of you who came out to our Port Commissioners meeting last Tuesday and provided comments to our MCAS. At the board, we had a lively discussion of the MCAS, and so staff is going back, taking in your comments and the feedback you gave on MCAS. our comments from the board, and we'll be coming back with the new round. And so we'll have an updated timeline soon. So we'll make sure that you're all updated. And if you're signed up to our email list, you'll get email notifications. So always feel free to email me or Larry Hoffreiter, who's here. We'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Great, thanks. Any questions for Sandy at this point? No? Okay, great, wonderful. I know you guys have been doing a lot of work on that, so thank you for all your hard work and everybody and your input. So Sarah, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I was hoping maybe Domingo could touch on what kind of are the next steps in terms of reviewing the final SERP product, because I know we worked on it for a really long time and it went through extensive reviews, and then it feels like all of a sudden everything is ramped up and there's been a lot of changes. I know there's been some public comments and potentially changes that were made as a result of that. And I guess I would like to understand when is the document going to be kind of ready for that final review?
Sure. Thank you, Sarah. So this draft that went out for public comment was the last opportunity to comment. We did receive a few comments from the members of the public, a couple of comment letters as well. So right now we're in the process of trying to extract anything that needs to be either edited or modified or incorporated into the SERP. And then as we identify any potential impacts to any of the implementing entities, we will discuss those directly with the entities just to make sure that we're incorporating feedback in the SERP in a way that is not hurting the implementation of the SERP. So it will be more of a one-on-one follow-up whenever is warranted. And then the final document will be ready for the steering committee to approve in our next meeting in June. So to that end, our goal is to have the final document ready and released. I'm pulling on my calendar, by June 4th, so that we can have it out in advance of our meeting and people can have an opportunity to review it, so that when we come to the meeting, we just present a summary and we can highlight any areas that were modified or that received that were changed or updated based on the public comment period, and then the steering committee can have an opportunity to vote.
Thanks. And I would encourage, if it's possible, maybe to have a red line strikeout version so we can actually see the things that were implemented as changes.
Absolutely. That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Great. Wonderful. Okay, go ahead, Jack.
Thank you, Danielle. Domingo, just following on Sarah's question, are you planning on dedicating a large portion of the June meeting to the SERP then, or will we have other stuff on the agenda as well?
Right now, our main item will be the SERP, understanding that all the input was already received, and at that point it would have been incorporated. So the time that we'll spend at our next meeting with the SERP will just be kind of walking through the final document and highlighting any potential any changes that were incorporated into the document. So I don't anticipate that will take most of the meeting, but it will certainly have it will be the main item on the agenda. I don't have any other item in mind right now that we need to bring next month, but as things come up, we can evaluate and we can see if there's an opportunity to include it in the next meeting, or if we can push it to another meeting, depending on what that item is.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I think it could be a substantial discussion, even though it is the last copy. We've kind of hit bits and pieces for the last 2 or 3 months, and it'll be a good chance for us. I appreciate the fact you're getting it out early before the meeting, enough time for us to kind of go through and digest it as a whole document and take a look at all the parts. So yeah, the more time we have, the better. Anyway, so thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Sure. Thanks for all the input to everybody that has provided their comments and input. Again, this document is really, you know, a collaborative effort, and everybody who has contributed to this document should feel really proud, and we are very grateful to be collaborating with all of you. So thanks again for everybody's time, for all your contributions.
Great, and Domingo, Hillary Medina, who is joining us tonight, had a question, and also for you, Commissioner Naranjo, and for Larry, just asking if there are other resources for the community resources to share with the community about the SERP and the MCAS as well. And so I know that I'm going to post in the chat to everybody the link to the 617 SERP website that has links to the Spanish summary of Chapter 7, and also the guide on how to review the SERP, and also contact information for Monique that goes directly to Monica Melgozo's email box for if you have questions about the SERP. And is there a website that we can share for in the chat for the MCAS, Larry? Or
just put it in the chat, Danella.
Perfect.
There's a website for the MCAS, and it's available in Spanish and English, so you can see so far what we've done, and we have the recorded community conversation where we took questions. And there's even a transcript of that. So everything should be there.
Great, thank you so much. Wonderful.
And also on our website, for those who were not able to attend our public workshops, our workshop videos are posted on the website, just like Chuy mentioned in the beginning of the meeting. So I really encourage you, if you didn't have a chance, those presentations, we kind of walk you through what's included in the SERP, and more specifically Chapter 7, which includes all of our goals, strategies, and actions.
Yes, and I'm going to post a link here to the YouTube channel where you could also open the window and you can see us all being live streamed right now at this moment on YouTube with a bit of a delay. But they do have that website. Monica has been running it and doing a great job. That has recordings of all of the meetings of both the steering committee, the workshops, and also the board. So the SDAPCD board. So you might want to save that in your bookmarks. With that, any other questions or comments, public comments from members of the public or the steering committee? Okay, if not, does anyone from the Air District have any comments or questions or final words you want to leave us with tonight?
I have a final comment just for folks to be aware. We will be reaching out to members from the public that are part of the steering committee to see if anybody wants to participate in the board meeting where we will be presenting the final SERP for the board approval. It would be great if we could have maybe a couple members of the community as part of the presentation to help us communicate, from the community's perspective, what the SERP means for them, and also just the significance for the community. So be on the lookout. And if anybody already, would like to volunteer, please reach out to me directly, and I'd be happy to talk to you a little bit more about it.
Great. Well, with that, I just want to summarize. We did a lot of work today, and we're going to end right on time, if not a few minutes early. So I think I just want to commend everybody. We really did a good brainstorm on new metrics to incorporate into the SERP as we're coming, rounding third base, coming close to home base to finish this project. I think that thank you for Kathy for leading us through the prioritization activity. It was very moving for me to hear a summary of what I heard was that people come and people are excited about the work that they do in the steering committee and the promise of the SERP because of the health of your families, your children. I heard people sharing concerns about their mom's health, their kids' health, their husbands, and also the desperation for a beautiful community, for beautifying it and for improving our neighborhoods, and a vision of neighborhoods without trucks and not without truckers, but really what we mean is trucks going around the community, and maybe they're electric so that we're not inhaling all the toxic fumes that are making us sick. So I just want to recognize that all the work that you have put into this. It's a long process, and in June we're going to culminate. It's going to be like our graduation, right? We're finishing the SERP. So thank you everybody for your grain of sand, and appreciate you. And thank you, Frida, for interpreting and for making everybody able to hear everybody's words tonight. And yeah, and thank you. And with that, we'll close with 4 minutes early, so we get 4 minutes of your life back. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Good night. Buenas
Good
noches.
night.
Gracias.
Buenas noches a todos.
Buenas noches, bendiciones.
Buenas noches.
Igual.